Hello friends, welcome back to Every Arnold Movie Ever, Episode 9. We have arrived at the seismic shift. If Conan was the role that made Arnold Schwarzenegger a household name, this next one would transcend any previous barriers he faced and go on to become a game-changing pop culture phenomenon. This is Arnold's trademark, career-defining, first thing to be mentioned in his obituary role, the Terminator. Let's find out how it went from, in Arnold's words, some shit movie I'm doing, to one of the greatest sci-fi action films of all time. Arnold Schwarzenegger was never one to rest on his laurels. Even though in 1982 Conan had become a success, Arnold had even bigger plans. What if I shoot to become one of Hollywood's top 5 leading men? People were always talking about how few performers there were at the top of the ladder. I felt that because there was so little room, people got intimidated and felt more comfortable staying at the bottom of the ladder. But in fact, the more people that think that, the more crowded the bottom of the ladder becomes. Don't go where it's crowded, go where it's empty. So Arnold started looking for rungs on the ladder he could grab onto. Only one problem. He had a 10-year contract with Dino De Laurentiis to exclusively make Conan movies and nothing else. Arnold's agent reassured him they could negotiate that, and so Arnold started looking at other scripts. Remember, he had a couple rules for what he would take at this point. Leading man roles, no villains. So he was fielding a lot of war movies, cop movies, even a couple romances. He was leaning towards playing Paul Bunyan because he thought having a blue ox for a sidekick would be funny. He was also circling a script called Big Bad John, where he plays a coal miner who saves his fellow miners during a collapse. And then Mike Medavoy, head of Orion Pictures, approached him with what he described as the perfect movie for Arnold. A sci-fi action movie called The Terminator. Arnold would play a brave soldier named Kyle Reese, who saves the girl and protects the future of the world. Arnold was nonplussed, to say the least. I was instantly suspicious because there had been a schlock action movie called The Exterminator a few years before. Now it was The Terminator, and what else is going to be next type of thing. But he read the script and agreed to take a meeting with the writer-director in the spring of 1983. A meeting that would change both of their lives forever. That director, as you may know, was James Cameron. Now, Cameron had gained a reputation as a special effects wizard who could turn styrofoam takeout containers into the interior hull of a spaceship, like he did on Battle Beyond the Stars. Also, he designed this boob spaceship. He was a hard worker with dreams of becoming the next John Carpenter, who had a light bulb moment when he saw Star Wars, and he quit his job the next day to make a short film. It's fun to track all these influences and their reverberations. Classics beget classics. Without Lucas being inspired by Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress, there's no Star Wars. Without Star Wars, there's no Terminator. And without the Terminator, there's no Chappie. Now, Cameron wasn't content with making models for other people's movies, so under the tutelage of Roger Corman, he worked his way up to second unit director and eventually landed his first gig directing in 1982. Well, technically his first 5 days of a directing gig for the movie Piranha 2, The Spawning.
It lives in the depths of the sea, but it can strike anywhere. Loretta, what is this?
Before he was unceremoniously fired with the claim that his footage wasn't cutting together. It sounds like it was a bit of a hit job. Cameron was set up to fail, but he wouldn't go quietly. In an attempt to confront the producers, Cameron traveled to Rome, but ended up falling ill. And in the middle of the night, he had a fever dream, and this unshakable image popped into his mind. He woke up, and he sketched the image, and it was a chrome skeleton emerging from a fire, torn in half, with a kitchen knife dragging its broken arm. And let that be a lesson to all of us. Anytime you wake up from a crazy dream, write it down, because you never know when inspiration will strike. I did it last night. It's a miracle. Here's what I dreamt about. Behold, my cinematic masterpiece. What? It's a ship. All right, after his... Jesus Christ. All right, after his Rome meeting tanked, Cameron went back home and he got to work. Actually, he didn't really have a home at the time because he was broke, so he stayed at a friend's place in Pomona, California. It's about 45 minutes away from LA, but feels worlds away. There was nothing else to do there but write, so Cameron put together a detailed 48-page treatment, which was eventually expanded to 122 pages, which is much longer than the script would end up being, and he sent that out to be shopped around. Now, that treatment included 2 Terminators, the first one being the T-800 model, this one. The second one had a liquid metal exterior. It also included a daring raid on Cyberdyne Systems to further prevent the nuclear war. Cameron took that idea to his friend Gale Ann Hurd, who wanted to be basically the next Deborah Hill, John Carpenter's producer, and it just so happens Cameron wanted to be John Carpenter. So he showed her the concept for Terminator, and they formed what is described as a blood oath. He sold the rights to the Terminator for $1 with the promise that no matter what, Cameron directs the movie. It's a deal Cameron says he doesn't regret, even though it meant we, the audience, would suffer from the Cameron-less sequels for years to come. But he said, I have a career as a result, and, I'll take it. I'll take it. Cameron was able to sell the story on pure theater. He had his buddy Lance Henriksen, who was in Piranha 2, dress up in a ripped t-shirt, leather jacket, and gold foil from a cigarette pack on his teeth. And he kicked open the door of the Hemdale production company, and he sat in the lobby for 15 minutes. He asked, is Jim here? When Cameron came in, they were so impressed by his stunt, they ushered him right into the office, and he sold the movie right there. Now, look, there's a bit of myth-making to that story, but from what I've read, it seems mostly true.
Mostly.
Cameron made a deal with Hemdale and Orion to split the budget of the movie, which ended up being around $6.4, maybe $6.5 million. He also removed the liquid metal Terminator and the raid on Cyberdyne, and we'd all be better off for that, actually. As casting began, they had 3 major roles to fill: the Terminator, Kyle Reese, and Sarah Connor. Sarah Connor had several women in contention, coming down to Jennifer Jason Leigh and Rosanna Arquette. That is, until Linda Hamilton auditioned, and the part was instantly hers. And although Lance Henriksen was still in contention for the Terminator, producer Mike Medavoy suggested O.J. Simpson. But, as legend has it, Cameron didn't think he showed enough killer instinct. Oh man. Let's hope that he didn't give O.J. some sort of murder inferiority complex. James, what have you done? And if O.J. seems out of the box as a casting choice, wait until you hear the other options they had for Kyle Reese. Included in this Terminator Vault book, which I'm gonna put in my hands here, the Terminator Vault, which I also use for a lot of research. They have reproductions of photos and production notes. One of particular interest are these casting notes. Check this out. Now, when casting a movie, tons of names are thrown around. A lot of them end up being pipe dreams or wild swings, but it's a fun glimpse into an alternate universe, which is appropriate for a movie like The Terminator. Some of these make sense, some are absolutely crazy. Options for Reese include Kurt Russell, who fits the model, and he happens to have the same initials. Another option was Mel Gibson, who might have made Kyle Reese a more shell-shocked future warrior, but we already saw that with Mad Max, so no thanks. Treat Williams would have been fine. Tommy Lee Jones, could you imagine? He seemed too old for that even in the early 80s. Scott Glenn, yeah, it would have been fine. Sting? Wait, Sting? Sting would have been Kyle Reese? That would have been crazy! But you can either thank or blame David Lynch because he had already booked Sting for Dune, so he wasn't available. Another one? Christopher Reeve, Superman himself, right after Superman 3. That could have changed the trajectory of his entire career. But he doesn't really strike me as a military type. I don't know, it would have felt a little weird. But, out of all of them, my all-time favorite Hail Mary casting was this one. Bruce Springsteen, the boss. Now, it sounds like it never made it to his desk, considering he didn't have any acting experience, and his agent was basically like, yeah, it'll probably be a no. But I would love to know how Bruce's name even came up in conversation, where they're just talking about musicians they like, and they're like, well, Sting. Hey, Bruce is cool. I wonder if he can act. Yeah, come with me if you want to live. Anyway, they went with Michael Biehn, and he's great. And the other name that came up was Arnold Schwarzenegger. Cameron didn't see it. Reese is a guy who's just rapping off information. Boom, boom, boom. Arnold didn't strike me as a guy who could deal with page after page of dialogue at that time. And Arnold as the Terminator made equally little sense. He's supposed to be an infiltration unit able to easily blend into a crowd. You can spot Arnold from a mile away. Cameron had to at least take the meeting before rejecting the casting idea, though, so he came up with a plan. James Cameron was going to start a fight with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, before leaving for his predestined battle with Conan, James Cameron told his roommate William Wisher, if it doesn't go well, you can have the chair and the stereo. They met at Schatzi, a German deli in Santa Monica, but it turns out Cameron couldn't self-terminate. Arnold was so charming, he immediately disarmed Cameron. They found common ground as immigrants with self-determination and confidence. And as Arnold talked about the script, he had one concern. Whoever's playing the Terminator, if it's O.J. Simpson or whoever, it's very important that he gets trained the right way. If this guy is really a machine, he won't blink when he shoots. When he loads a new magazine into his gun, he won't have to look because a machine will be doing it, a computer. When he kills, there will be absolutely no expression on his face. Not joy, not victory, not anything. Arnold had all sorts of designs on how the actor should train for the role. And the more they talked, the more Cameron could envision Arnold as the title character. During the lunch, Cameron even started sketching Arnold as the machine and blurted out, "You've got to play the Terminator." Arnold said, "Oh, I came for the other guy." And suddenly, it's all Cameron could see. But it took a hard sell. Arnold didn't want to play a villain so early in his career, but Cameron made a persuasive argument. The Terminator isn't evil or good. It's a machine. If you play it in an interesting way, you can turn it into a heroic figure that people admire because that's what it's capable of. That is some top-level bullshit, but if I've learned anything in my life, it's that Cameron doesn't bullshit. He can manifest ideas that seem unfeasible into iconic moments in cinema. It's happened time and time again, and everyone's laughing about the next couple Avatar movies, but I am telling you, they are going to make a lot of money, and I bet you they're going to be pretty great. Arnold went off to consider the offer, but he had a vision for himself, and he didn't want to deviate from that plan. Playing a villain, to him, would have been career suicide, yet something was pulling him towards that role. It was a chance to get out of the prehistoric movies. The Terminator looked great, he was the title character, and the pay was good. Plus, it was low profile enough that if it was a disaster, it might not ding his career. So, he didn't think that long, because the next day, Arnold agreed. And there was just one problem. Same problem I talked about earlier. That 10-year deal with Dino. Even though Arnold's relationship with Dino got off to a rocky start, they had grown to appreciate one another. Dino understood Arnold's position, and he agreed to let him do the Terminator under two conditions. One, they continue making Conan movies as long as it's profitable. And two, that Arnold commit to a contemporary action movie at a later date. Arnold agreed, and oh right, there was one more little thing. Arnold had to go into production on Conan the Destroyer immediately, which would postpone the Terminator for 9 months. That is a huge ask given how determined Cameron was to make this movie, but he ultimately accepted. And it's a testament to how much his confidence in Arnold had grown since their first meeting. And I totally relate to that. I share that personality trait with Cameron, where if I'm running a writer's room, say, and we're trying to come up with an idea, best idea usually wins. And sometimes I'm not on board with that idea at first, but as soon as we make that decision and I say, that's the idea we're going with, I am all in, and I will fight for that idea until the end, or until my boss says, "God damn, why would we do that idea? No." And then I say, okay, here's another 6 ideas. That's an impression of nobody in particular, by the way. And let's all pause a moment to give thanks to one of the most important movies in sci-fi action history. Conan the Destroyer. Yeah, that's right. I withheld one key piece of information from the Conan the Destroyer episode, and it's this. Arnold has to take Destroyer. Cameron has to wait 9 months, but James Cameron cannot sit idly by. So he re-storyboards Terminator all over again, and he picks up a couple extra projects. The first one being Rambo First Blood Part 2, which he co-wrote with Sylvester Stallone, and the second being a pitch meeting for a sci-fi sequel where legend has it, he walked into the room and he wrote this. Alien with the $sign. You've probably heard that story before, but the other part of the story that I hadn't heard until reading about it in the Terminator Vault was that Cameron's Aliens treatment stopped halfway through with the announcement, and then some bullshit happens. So, if not for Conan the Destroyer, we wouldn't have the masterpiece Aliens. Hell yeah! Fucking Conan the Destroyer, see? There's some value to that movie. Meanwhile, Arnold was having doubts about the success of the Terminator. On the set of Conan, he was quoted in an interview as saying his next project was, "Some shit movie should only take a couple weeks." You can't really blame him. The budget was $6.4 million. Cameron was entirely unproven, and the things he wanted to accomplish, if not done properly, would destroy the story's credibility and any sense of danger the movie wanted to create. Luckily, Cameron came correct. He hired legend in the making Stan Winston to create the Terminator's endoskeleton, with the directive that the cyborg had to very clearly avoid looking like a man in a suit. He did not want a C-3PO situation here. He wanted the audience to wonder, how did they do that? Difficult to do on such a tight budget. In fact, towards the end of production, they ran out of money for permits and pickups and had to steal several shots, which I will point out to you moving forward. However, at the start of filming, anyone who had doubts about whether the movie would work would find out 3 weeks into production on Arnold's very first day. It was a scene where the Terminator is in a stolen police car scanning for Kyle and Sarah, and Cameron immediately knew he had something. Arnold had this idea that the Terminator should move his eyes before his head, and it was such a simple choice.
But it gives it this eerie, inhuman quality that sells the entire concept.
A few weeks later, Arnold saw some assembled footage and was blown away. He was also starting to appreciate Cameron's talents as a director, though he may have taken the wrong lessons from it. Cameron was famously mercurial, which is code for dune sandworm, which is code for giant asshole. On the set, Cameron knew every detail and was constantly on his feet adjusting things. He knew everybody's name and made it very clear that you couldn't fuck with him or cheat. He'd scream at you and punish you publicly and make a scene, all the while using precise terminology that made the lighting guy feel, this guy knows more about lights than I do. I'd better do exactly as he says. It was an education for someone like me who does not pay attention to such details. But not even Arnold was safe from Cameron's ire. Lame ideas really irritated him, especially if they involved the script. I decided one day that the Terminator didn't have enough funny moments. There's a scene where the cyborg goes into a house and walks past a refrigerator. So I thought maybe the fridge door could be open. He sees the beer inside, wonders what it is, drinks it, gets a little buzz, and acts silly for a second. Jim cut me off before I could even finish. It's a machine. It's not E.T. It can't get drunk. Imagine a lit Terminator. For someone who got so much right about the character, this is just so hilariously off base. Was Arnold thinking back to the drunk scene he filmed in Conan the Destroyer, and he was like, yeah, let's do that again.
Blood on your knife.
It actually gives you pretty good insight into Arnold's sense of humor, but it makes me wonder what questionable jokes he came up with that actually made it into his movies. Was he responsible for the camel gag in Conan the Destroyer? Did he come up with Talk to the Hand in Terminator 3?
Talk to the hand.
Oh no. Okay, that's an investigation for another time. Let's get into the movie. The Terminator is cleanly split into 3 acts. Act 1, the hunt. Act 2, the chase. And Act 3, the confrontation. The entire movie is propulsive, always on the move. It only slows down when absolutely necessary in 2 spots. Otherwise, someone is on the run, either on foot or in a car. Act 1 opens in the midst of a cyborg apocalypse in the aftermath of a nuclear holocaust in the year 2029. That's currently 8 years from now, but given how things are going, it seems like an overestimation. People can't even wear a fucking mask to help their fellow man without whining like babies. You think they're going to figure out how to stop a robot revolution? Yeah. The second shot here presents the thesis of the entire movie. Machinery easily crushing human skulls. These future sequences were created by Gene Warren Jr. and his miniature effects team at Fantasy 2. It uses every trick in the book. Rear projection, front projection, composite shots, forced perspective. The backgrounds are foam core buildings. These hunter-killers were hung on fishing line, and Cameron's shoestring budget is masked by a hell of a lot of bee smoke. This skull in the foreground is a full-size skull. These skulls in the background are miniatures. They had to create hundreds of them, and it gives the image depth. And establishing what the future looks like sets the stakes for everything moving forwards and, I guess, backwards. This is the future they're fighting to prevent, and it's a perfect mood setter. Then we're taken to 1984 and introduced to the Terminator. It's a great, simple effect here, and an iconic introduction of the T-800 Model 101. Even this lightning was created using a legit Tesla coil, and I love this garbage man's reaction, mostly because they cut and paste the exact same line of dialogue twice within 30 seconds.
What the hell?
Then the Terminator wanders off into Griffith Park Observatory with his cute little butt and approaches some stereotypical 80s street punks, which happens to include Bill Paxton with tread marks on his face. They tease this giant naked man, and will, of course, come to regret that, especially when Paxton provokes him with a
"Fuck you, asshole."
Now that seems like a throwaway, but it is a line that will be back later. Fuck, it's so hard to do this without just saying something will be back and not making a big deal of it. Anyway.
Fuck you, asshole.
Then we meet Kyle Reese, who doesn't get as graceful an entrance as the Terminator. I always thought this looked brutal, and it turns out it was a legit 9-foot drop onto real concrete. Reese gets flagged by the cops while trying to steal a homeless man's pants and ducks into a department store to steal some sweet kicks. I always loved how he checks the shoe size against his feet, and then also that he
stylishly velcros his Nikes.
It's a little like Marty McFly there. Then both Reese and the Terminator set off on their missions. And we are 9 minutes in. We've already learned of the future wars, been introduced to the lethality of the Terminator, and meet the resilient, resourceful Kyle Reese. That is precise, efficient storytelling. We're then introduced to Sarah Connor riding a hilariously boxy moped with 80s poodle hair and acid-wash jeans. She's an everyday, ordinary girl with everyday, ordinary problems. She's just trying to get through the day without having some jerk-ass kid stick ice cream in her pocket. Cameron based her on several people in his life. His first wife, who worked at Bob's Big Boy. His mother, who was a member of the Canadian Women's Army Corps. On the weekends, she wore military fatigues and could assemble a rifle blindfolded. Throw in a dash of Ripley from Alien and Laurie Strode from Halloween, and you've got yourself Sarah Connor.
This shot of the Terminator busting the window was shot without a permit,
And then he takes the stolen car and visits a gun shop to order all the guns. And I like how an Uzi is just haphazardly chilling on the shelf. Dick Miller here is pumped for a big sale so he can go home early, but Arnold instead sends him to an early grave.
You can't do that.
Wrong.
Now, Kyle and the Terminator's plans start out exactly the same. This is called a phone book, kids. You could find them at payphones, which were like giant cell phones except stuck in the ground and covered in human juices. Then it's off to find Sarah Connor. He pulls up to a house and runs over this Ertl truck. And there's something just terrifying about this scene, from the seemingly random act of violence to the use of slow motion. It draws out this murder and just makes it feel so unsettling. But while the Terminator is making his way down the list of Sarah Connors, Kyle Reese is taking a nap. Look, I have no doubt time travel is exhausting, but it seems like we've got a bit of a ticking clock situation here, Kyle. You want to hurry it up with the naps? He starts having flashbacks, or is it flash forwards? And we get another glimpse into the future, this time with Reese leading a battalion. And I love this stuff. It all feels so tactile. These are all incredibly detailed miniatures. This bomb was about 2 inches long and took 26 takes to get it to land perfectly under the tread. Anyway, Kyle gets a lot of his battalion killed and wondering about his soldiering skills. Meanwhile, we establish Sarah's living situation. She's getting ready for a date while her roommate Ginger waits for her boyfriend to show up. Now, they're surrounded by electronics and technology, and Sarah's even wearing a Jetsons t-shirt, a detail I never picked up on until this last viewing. Sarah gets stood up for her date via answering machine, another use of technology.
I'm really sorry. I'll make it up to you.
And that's James Cameron's voice on the answering machine, so she changes into this tie-dye shirt and goes to the movies alone. At the same time, we're introduced to two detectives played by Lance Henriksen, hey, he made it in there, and Paul Winfield. A couple Sarah Connors have been murdered already, and now they're finally starting to take interest. And I love these characters. They think they're the stars of their own buddy cop movie, and they don't even realize they are in a sci-fi action movie where cops are disposable. If you pay attention, you'll notice that Paul Winfield's detective actually does have a very subtle story arc. He goes from being completely skeptical about this whole story to totally buying in, albeit a little too late. There are actually a few deleted scenes to support this.
The guy's a wacko, right? He better be. She's got to stay alive, so.
But again, it's not his movie, so a lot of that is left to your 10th or 12th viewing to pick up on it. While Sarah is out, she catches Reese unsubtly creeping on her. Nice covert ops soldier. She ducks into the Tech Noir, a nightclub that doubles as an in-joke for Cameron, who coined the term as a new genre for the Terminator. But while Sarah is at the nightclub, the Terminator visits her home and finds Ginger and her boyfriend. We get some cute Walkman humor here where Ginger can't hear the fight going on in the other room, and then the cyborg dispatches of them both. But Arnold betrays his own training and totally blinks while shooting. Look at him, shooting and blinking. Arnold, you liar. The Terminator tracks Sarah to the club, and Cameron again does a great job of building a really suspenseful set piece utilizing slow motion. The Terminator has Sarah dead to rights until Reese unloads on him. He stops him long enough to give us the classic Reese line,
"Come with me if you want to live."
And like a lot of the iconic lines in this movie, it's delivered without much flash or substance, and that's the great thing about this original movie. It isn't referencing anything else, it's its own thing. This line is repeated in some variation in every Terminator movie moving forward, quickly becoming a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy.
Come with me if you want to live.
You want to live? Come on!
Come with me if you want to live.
Come with me if you want to live.
Come with me if you want to live.
You come with me or you're dead in the next 30 seconds.
Kings of recognition, like I mentioned in Conan the Destroyer. But here, this is the pure, uncut, unburdened good stuff.
Come with me if you want to live.
And this is the moment we shift into Act 2, the chase. Now things kick into high gear. Reese and Sarah try to escape. We get our first glimpse of the Terminator's point of view, then Reese blows up a car and burns off the Terminator's eyebrows. Arnold actually had his eyebrows insured in case they never grew back. I guess he was a little worried about that. And the eyebrows are the beginning of this slow shedding of humanity from the Terminator. As he becomes more and more damaged, he becomes less and less like a human and infinitely more menacing. The genius of Act 2 is that during this exciting high-speed chase, Kyle Reese is just unloading all of this exposition. It never slows things down, mostly because he literally at certain points is just like, hang on a second, time for more action.
Just a second.
And I think all movies should be required to deliver their exposition during high-speed car chases. It is a massive information dump during this section, the type of info Cameron knew Arnold couldn't deliver as Reese. And Michael Biehn does it with conviction. It's all important because he needs Sarah to hear all this so she has time to process it. He needs her to believe him. There's also a line in here where even Reese isn't sure how time travel works.
Are you saying it's from the future?
One possible future. I don't know tech stuff.
And honestly, it provides just enough cover to close any possible paradox loops, which I will get to in a moment. There's a ton of world building packed into this if you want to dig into it.
Part man, part machine. Underneath it's a microprocessor control. Outside it's living human flesh, skin. The 600 series had rubber skin. Sweat, bad breath, everything. Terminator is out there.
We learn about the leader of the Resistance, John Connor, who happens to be Sarah's unborn son. And also they have to switch cars, and Reese makes yet another tactical mistake. Because they also get spotted pretty quickly by the Terminator. Then the chase ends when they crash and the cops apprehend them. The Terminator escapes, of course, because he's much better at this than Kyle. And it's here we get a showcase of some of the great effects Stan Winston has cooked up. This self-surgery is an animatronic arm with another person's hand under the desk. And this amazing head model where we get a nod to Un Chien Andalou. Look, it's dated, but it's still just so eerie. And I just think it's so much more effective than CGI. You know that there's something in that physical space and that it took a lot of people to craft something that looks that good with their own hands. Plus, I love the ingenuity of the design. This is our first big interruption to the chase. In the police department, everyone is skeptical of Kyle's story. We're introduced to Dr. Silberman, a smug psychologist, who conducts his interview with Reese as a form of entertainment for the cops. They just laugh it off, and from their point of view, I guess it's a rational reaction. What Kyle is saying is impossible to comprehend if you haven't seen what Sarah's seen. But from a storytelling perspective, it's genius, because the audience knows the truth. And so they see the cops as foolish and woefully unprepared, which is why a line like,
"You'll be perfectly safe. I got 30 cops in this building,"
is its own setup and punchline of a dark joke. We, the audience, know what the Terminator is capable of. We just heard Kyle Reese say it can't be bargained with, reasoned with, etc. And now that we've seen the cops be assholes to characters we like, we kind of feel like they deserve what they get. This is a tricky balance, and it's something Arnold feels gave the Terminator a slightly heroic shade, and it's the reason people connect with the character. How do you make people admire a cyborg that lays waste to a police station and massacres 30 cops? It was a combination of how I played the part, how we shot the character, and subtle things Jim did to make the cops look like schmucks. Instead of being competent guardians of public safety, they're always off base, always a step behind. So the viewer thinks they're stupid, and the Terminator wipes them out. But that joke is just a B-side, because the most iconic moment of the movie, possibly of Arnold's entire career, comes right after that, and it's a perfect joke.
I'll be back.
When Arnold says, "I'll be back," you know his version of being back will be egregious. And the punchline of "I'll be back" is the massacre of 30 cops. A joke within a joke. It feels instantly iconic, even though it wasn't meant to be. By that point, the audience has been primed. They understand how deadly he is. And it's also a subversion. The Terminator could just kill this guy right here, but instead, he examines the area and he calculates a more efficient way in. Now, Arnold and Cameron disagreed about the delivery of this line, claiming it was their biggest argument. There are conflicting stories about how they arrived at the line. Some say Cameron had it written as "I'll come back," but Arnold couldn't pronounce it correctly, so he shortened it to "I'll be back." According to Arnold, he wanted to say "I will be back" because he didn't understand contractions. Would it have been less effective these ways? The joke still works. They settled it when Cameron just told Arnold,
Trust me.
and the line was forever etched into cinematic history. Out of context, it's a good line. In context, it's a great line. And it leads to the Terminator methodically making his way through the station, killing all the cops. And it also cements Sarah's belief in Kyle Reese. He's all she has left, so they escape together and seek shelter. And here's our second big slowdown of the movie, but the most important. Reese gives Sarah more information about the future and explains he would die for John Connor. And while it could have been easy to get lost in the mumbo-jumbo talk of the future, they always kept it grounded. When Sarah's told she becomes a great soldier, she fires back,
I can't even balance my checkbook.
Then she needs to go to sleep, so she has him tell her some bedtime stories about how fucking awful the future is, and we head to the future to get a better or worse glimpse of life there. Everything is hollowed out, dark, deep, underground, catching rats for dinner, watching a fire in the husk of a television for entertainment. It's some bleak shit. The only hope Kyle is given is a Polaroid of Sarah. Then we see the T-600 infiltrate, and it looks a lot like Arnold's old bodybuilding bud, Franco Columbo, who you may remember from Pumping Iron. You know, you gotta respect Arnold for bringing his old gym buddies along. Now, the T-600 kills a dog, so fuck him, and Kyle's picture of Sarah gets burned. This scene always felt funny to me because it ends with Kyle not stopping the T-600, and now I'm convinced that he's just a bad soldier. Back in 1984, Sarah and Kyle get a hotel room together, and Kyle sets out to buy some materials. Sarah calls her mom. Bad move, turns out to be the Terminator impersonating her, and Reese comes back with a bunch of materials to make bombs, and they have a romantic time making explosives, in which Kyle reveals he's a virgin.
A girl, you know? No. Never. Never.
Because this guy's life isn't miserable enough. Miraculously, he's able to parlay that information into an all-time pickup line.
I came across time for you, Sarah.
It works because, of course it does.
But also, Kyle volunteered to go back in time. John basically had no choice but to pick him. Did Kyle know exactly what the mission was? Did he really want to save humanity? Or was he just trying to get laid?
Things get incredibly prickly and twisty and mind-melty in regards to time travel and John Connor's father being from the future, coming back to the past to impregnate a woman. Maybe, but he only exists in the future. And how's that even possible? Because at least one timeline where Kyle Reese didn't exist to get us to that future point. The future had to progress far enough for him to be born, for John to say, I'm back, and now I have gray matter leaking out of my ears, but damn it, it's a great idea. Kyle and Sarah are literally given 3 seconds to feel like a normal, happy couple.
Think fast.
Before the Terminator shows up, and we are thrust into Act 3 of the movie. They're able to escape again, and the Terminator grabs a motorcycle and peels out.
But the motorcycle doesn't last long. Sarah rams him, and the Terminator hilariously gets run over by a truck. Payback for smashing that Erdl earlier. More metal is exposed, and the Terminator hijacks the truck that hit him. He also shows one moment of mercy here by being incredibly nice to this truck driver.
Get out.
Possibly because Cameron was a truck driver himself. Reese is in bad shape, but Sarah takes the initiative and gets him on his feet, marking the beginning of her transformation. She's fallen in love with this guy and has fully bought into the gravity of the situation. The Terminator runs them down in this tanker, and Reese gathers enough strength to slip a pipe bomb in the exhaust. The truck explodes in impressive fashion, and this was another miniature by the Fantasy 2 team, an 8-foot-long replica rigged to explode like a chain reaction from the back to front. Actually, the first time they tried it, the wire yanked the axle off the front of the truck, but it was too late. They had to blow it anyway. Luckily, they were able to do it again and nailed it. The Terminator burns up, Sarah and Kyle survive, and the movie ends. At least, that's how the executives wanted the movie to end. The cut they saw didn't have any effects of the cyborg after the truck explodes. Just a handwritten note, scene missing. So producer John Daly went to Cameron and said, when the truck blows up, the movie ends. Cameron, for once, had a measured response. Guess what? Fuck you!
I'm gonna go finish the film, and I'm gonna show you what it's gonna look like.
And he walked out. Cameron thought he was fired. He probably should have been. But nothing happened. He was given the chance to finish the movie. And I'm glad to see that that measured behavior was rewarded. You know, it's nice. It's nice when you're nice to other people and you... I don't know. Different time, they say. Thank God the movie continued, because it's the ace up Cameron's sleeve the moment his fever dream comes alive, when the Terminator, its exterior flesh melted off, emerges as an endoskeleton in all its animatronic model and stop-motion glory. Sarah's scream here sells the hopelessness of the situation. Always gets to me. And they go to hide in a machine factory. The close-ups of the Terminator are gorgeous, all gleaming chrome with the exception of human teeth. What a choice. Cameron even requested the Terminator limp, like Arnold was in the scenes leading up to this. And Reese struggles again. Sarah has to get him back up to his feet. Eventually he baits the cyborg in and blows it up with a pipe bomb. But the Terminator operates under horror movie rules, so he has to get up one more time. Reese does not get up, so it's all up to Sarah. She crawls through the machinery to escape the machinery until she finally comes out on the other end of a hydraulic press and delivers a true catchphrase.
You're terminated, fucker.
This shot of the eye going out is just a camera lens with some cigarette smoke, and the shot of Reese getting zipped up here in the body bag is literally James Cameron's garment bag he had in his trunk. In a deleted scene, we discover this factory was actually Cyberdyne, which would have been an absurd coincidence, way too cute of an ending. They even shot a scene that's alluded to in T2, where they find the Terminator's CPU. Thankfully, none of that made it in. It would have really felt trite. Then we get the coda with Sarah on the open road in Mexico, pregnant with a dog, presumably to... Wait, not pregnant with a dog. Pregnant with a baby. She has a dog in the car, presumably to detect Terminators. We see the moment where her picture is taken and given one final warning.
He said there's a storm coming in.
And she's off towards an uncertain future.
Now, the second credit here was added in the home video release, an acknowledgement to the works of Harlan Ellison.
Because Ellison sued James Cameron after feeling some of the Terminator bore a resemblance to his stories. Cameron thought it was a nuisance suit, but felt the studio didn't back him up, and they settled. There was even a 10-year gag order, but once it was up in 1994, Cameron had matured and moved on, and just kidding, he said, Harlan Ellison is a parasite who can kiss my ass. Never changed, James Cameron. The score by Brad Fiedel is cold and synth-heavy, the heartbeat of a machine. It's very 80s, and anytime you see a movie or show set in the 80s today, it sounds an awful lot like this soundtrack. Stranger Things jumps to mind immediately. While it's pulsing and mechanical, it does have one hook that gives it a soul, and it's so great, in fact, that you can play it on anything and it sounds awesome. For instance... It's awesome. Other people think it's great too, including the people who did the soundtrack to The Lawnmower Man, which rips it off to a Vanilla Ice degree.
Ours goes ding 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 diggy ding 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 diggy ding ding. That little bitty change. It's not the same.
Terminator is such an important movie in my life. I loved Star Wars as a kid, but I never really thought of it in terms of filmmaking. Terminator, along with Terminator 2, shifted my relationship with movies from a love to an obsession. If not for these movies, my fate would have been set on a different course altogether. I watched this constantly. I would write my own Terminator scripts as a 10-year-old with descriptions of nuclear war and robot murders and stuff. I dressed up as the Terminator in 7th grade, handcrafting a cyborg eye piece with my brother and dad, and that obsession endures today. It's the reason why I wanted to do this video series on Arnold in the first place. Even when I rewatched the Terminator for this video, as soon as the end credits hit, I hit play again. There's something about it that I just connect with on a visceral level. And for James Cameron's first real movie, he emerges as a fully realized auteur, an actual visionary who could execute complex ideas with tight, exacting storytelling. The relentless driving nature of the movie is reminiscent of Raiders of the Lost Ark, a movie that also rarely slows down to catch its breath. The writing on display is so impressive, the mythology of the Terminator is simple enough on the surface to be understood, but if you want to dig deeper, there are layers to peel back. There's the allusion of John Connor to Jesus Christ, technophobia, fear of nuclear war, fear of the police as severely flawed protectors, fear that your fate is predestined, fear of the boogeyman, fear of going to techno clubs. Ugh. Much like the hint of the Clone Wars and Star Wars, the glimpse of the Future Wars implied a much bigger world beyond the screen, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Yet, it was grounded in these personal stories of an every woman thrust into the role of a savior. Sarah is the key to not just the future, but this story. If you don't buy into her journey, it all falls apart. One minute, she's a mediocre waitress. The next, she's running for her life, being told she's responsible for the survival of the human race. And by the end, she takes charge of her own fate. You have to be with her from the start for it to be a logical progression, and Linda Hamilton is able to give it weight and realism. This is her story. As a kid, I loved Kyle Reese. I saw him as the hero protector who could outsmart a Terminator with minimal resources and keep Sarah Connor safe. But as I grow older, I'm much more keenly aware of Reese's inherent sadness, and apparently his shitty soldiering skills. He's a lonely grunt who grew up in a cold, bleak future where every moment could be his last. There is no love, no levity, no happiness, other than a faded Polaroid. His purpose is noble, but joyless. He exists solely to fight for humanity, and if successful, make for a better future he won't see. It would be kind of funny if Sarah just wasn't into him, though, and when he said,
I came across time for you, Sarah,
she was just like, whoa, no. With the Terminator, we get an all-time great villain, an updated version of the Shape from Halloween, but even deadlier and with better motivation. This is Arnold's crowning achievement, a deceptively difficult role that requires strict discipline. Arnold is incredibly charismatic. He had to strip away any ego to demand more lines or be more expressive. Sorry, drunk Terminator, you're out. But Arnold put in the work, learning to holster and reload his gun without looking, shooting without blinking most of the time, field stripping a gun blindfold. His bodybuilding training was an asset in helping him with reps, as well as the ability to be in total control of his body. For the release, Orion had little faith in what they saw as an exploitation genre movie. They expected it to have one good week, then disappear. Cameron was furious at the marketing, but despite that, on October 26, 1984, the Terminator opened at number 1, making more than $4 million. Its second week, it would actually make more money than the first. It would stay at number 1 for 3 weeks and amass over $78 million worldwide on a $6 million budget. Cameron felt if the marketing were better, it would have made even more. It treated me like a piece of dog shit. However, there are some positives. For one, this began the Red Schwarzenegger poster run, where his last name was above the title in every single poster, signaling that Arnold was the biggest selling point of the movie. Sometimes that color changed, but his name was always on top, and it continued all the way up until his run as governor. When Terminator released, Arnold was in Rome shooting Red Sonja, so it wasn't until he came back that he understood the effect it had on his career. People would run up to him and say it, you gotta say it! And Arnold would have no clue, be like, say what? Like, you have to say, I'll be back! Here's what Arnold said about the impact of Terminator on his career. Conan was God's gift to my career, but the Terminator automatically doubled my price. Okay. Alright, stats time. Acting chops, 9. If he didn't blink, shooting his gun, would have been a 10. Kill count, 28. That brings his total to 86. Catchphrase.
Oh.
No, obviously it's, I'll be back. And here are the incredibly predictable, updated every Arnold movie ever movie rankings. Number 7, Hercules in New York. Number 6, The Villain. Number 5, Stay Hungry. Number 4, Conan the Destroyer. Number 3, Pumping Iron. Number 2, Conan the Barbarian. And number 1, of course, The Terminator. The Terminator gave Arnold Schwarzenegger everything he set out to accomplish in his acting career. But the reason Arnold was so successful is because when he accomplished one goal, he just set another. And now we're entering the unstoppable decade of Arnold with very few minor bumps along the way. One of those bumps happens to be our very next movie, a little contractually obligated cameo that secretly turned into a starring role, the movie Red Sonja. And hey, if you made it this far, seriously, thank you for watching. I'm glad I get a chance to share my passion with all of you, and I appreciate the subscriptions, the likes, the comments, and you know what? Even those who don't subscribe, like, or comment, you're just watching this video, you're cool too, and I appreciate you. And if I could hug you, well, I wouldn't because of COVID, but, you know, I'll give you a little salute and maybe a double thumbs up. And, yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Red Sonja. Oh, boy.